in the history of the West. It was only the socialism that ended up in genocide, so in the massive elimination of masses of people on, let's say, with the use of industrial methods, which is intentional. And as Leszek Kołakowski highlights in the comments to his main currents of Marxism, he highlights that socialism always ends up in a genocide.
This is Common Sense Generation. Common Sense Generation. Hello everyone. You're watching Common Sense Generation, and we are discussing philosophy, geopolitics, history. With me is Marek Kądzielski, Polish philosopher, lawyer, sworn translator. Who else? Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for inviting me to your program.
Right now, a lot of young people want to make a revolution. They want to rebel against the existing system and against the norms and the rule of the society. Why is it so? And is it always so that the young people want to make a revolution? Or right now it is a special moment? Where does it come from?
I think it's obvious that we are in a very special moment, that we can see the turmoil all over the world and some reformatting of the political system of the world in a global scale. But coming back to the revolution, this type of the revolution we are facing now is usually based, commonly based, on the very wrongful assumption about human nature, that it can be reformatted, that it's flexible and can be changed, hopefully for better, of course. And this is very delusional. This is a very old dispute in the philosophy, coming back to Socrates and his intellectual attitude, intellectual idealism, that I'm following evil because I'm not quite well explained what is evil and what is good. And once I'm explained, I will follow the good because this is human nature. And this is very wrong assumption. We have great tradition coming parallelly through the Western world in Judaism, the tradition that says that man is created by God with two attitudes, an inclination towards good and towards evil, so-called Yetzer HaTov and Yetzer Hara. In Plato's Anthropology, we have those two horses,
black horse and white horse.
Human soul apart towards good and evil. And of course, in Christian anthropology, we have this dogma about the original sin, which in philosophical terms is an explanation of evil that is innate in human nature. From my point of view, I would say that I am on the position of semi-strong nativism, which says that human nature is innate and unchangeable, with this reservation that the human nature is a system with the memory, so you can have changes, but gradual changes.
But it is always the case of choice, and this individual battle in every soul of every human being until the end of his life, if he's going to choose evil, if he's going to choose good, on every step of the way. So as metaphysically this battle is won by Jesus Christ, then it is not won in every
It is not so simple with human nature because we are struggling all our life, because we are not formatted once forever.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. We're struggling all our life.
As you mentioned metaphysics, I would start off with the declaration and explanation coming from the end of the 20th century that says that we cannot understand the history of the 20th century if we don't imply the metaphysical concepts. And this is one of the very critical mistakes if we want to understand the history of the 20th century without metaphysical concept.
I think this goal of depriving humanity of metaphysics is actually the first step to creating this very atrocious image of human nature, when we do want to have angels on earth, when we want to have paradise here, and when good is not enough, we want to live in a paradise where we want to destroy all the hierarchy and all the past that created what we have right now. And during this distraction, we realize that we are in fact jumping to hell.
Speaking in philosophical terms, the situation in philosophy in the 20th century, and it's prolonged in the beginning of the 21st century, is the following: that we have two lines that separate different schools of philosophy. One line is an attitude towards metaphysics, if we accept or not. And this tells us if we are naturalists or not, anti-naturalists, and naturalism prevails. And the other line tells if we accept logic as a traditional way of reasoning or not. So philosophy in the 20th century rejected metaphysics and rejected logic, and this is the result. But of course, this is more manifestation of what has already happened in the 20th century. In Polish literature and philosophy, it was predicted by Stanisław Ignacy Witkiewicz in this period between the wars that is so important in cultural terms for Poland. And coming back to your question about the revolution, we have to tell and distinguish between two types of revolution that happen in the West, because we are focusing on what is happening in the West.
So whoever wants to create a revolution right now has two options, how to choose. Which type of the revolution?
No, it's
bloody or less bloody?
There are two options a priori. Simply, revolutions follow certain patterns. And we have two types of them, as I mentioned. One is the English type of the revolution that
nice one, we only decapitate the king, the rest survives.
The English Revolution had its goals and objectives strictly in political terms. Plainly speaking, it was an answer to a question: is there anything above the will of the king? And the answer from the king was no, because Jacob II was an absolutist. And the answer from Oliver Cromwell was yes, the will of the people expressed in the parliament. So the revolution had its political goals, and it was
and it even didn't change the monarchy completely, so they didn't strip England of the monarchy, but they reformed
it. Did not eliminate the monarchy, because these goals were not social but political. And it was, let's say, the final stage of a very long historical process that started off with Magna Carta in the middle of 13th century, putting some system of checks and balances on the government that will protect the rights of the people, the rights of the nation. And this type of the revolution, once the revolution achieves its goals, the revolution ends. As we know, Cromwell was offered a crown. He was to be declared a king, and he rejected it very strongly. He criticized the people who offered him to be a king of England, because he claimed, you have not understood the goals of our revolution. And restatement of the monarchy, but of the parliamentary type, ended up this entire process. So Bertrand Russell says that after this revolution that is referred to as the glorious one in English history, no other revolution was needed. And the other type of the revolution is the French one. And the French Revolution is different. The French Revolution...
Let's kill them all, and then kill ourselves.
These are the methods, the tools, but French Revolution has different goals. The goals...
And then invite a dictatorship.
To promote other people to power, to change social order, to change internal structure of the society. And
were
this
French people
revolution
actually-
has no limits. This is very important. That's why, and this type of revolution is based, in my opinion, because English revolution is based on traditional view on human nature. And this type of revolution is based on this optimistic view coming from Rousseau.
Yes.
And because you cannot change human nature, and the goals of the revolution is to produce the new society which is based on the new man, it has to fail. But in this process, the revolution is using more and more terror because they want to reformat human souls.
Break it to the point when it's not possible.
That's why this type of the revolution ends up in terror. And at the very end, the terror may be pacified by a tyrant. So we have tyrants in the French Revolution.
Talleyrand. No.
Robespierre and Napoleon at the end. And a continuation in history of the English Revolution is the American Revolution. And openly speaking, the question was pretty much the same. Is there anything above the will of the King of England? And the answer from the Americans is that yes, we, the people. The will of the people.
And the creation of...
so it ended up in the creation of the new state, or the foundation of the new state.
And democracy.
And democracy is a form of a republic. Because republic is more important than democracy, because democracy is the form of the government, but as we know, the democracy has its limits and democracy has its paradoxes, because if 51% of the society votes for elimination of the remaining 49, it's a democratic choice. In the republic, it's not possible because we have this system of checks and balances. So we could see the leader, the commander, like Cromwell in English Revolution and Washington in American Revolution.
And
then
both actually are
elected
examples.
First president of the United States.
Both actually are examples of a unique giving up power and not grasping the ultimate.
This is characteristics of the English type of the revolution.
But it's also very unique when it comes to altogether human nature.
Because this type of revolution involves and requires unique people. And French type of revolution had its continuation in the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. And the aim of the revolution was to build up a completely new society, to eliminate the power of the bourgeois, to promote the working class. It also has its delusional objectives.
And creating a dictatorship.
And it ended up in terror and in dictatorship.
Which lasts until today.
This form of exercising power and the government in Russia, yes, because this was still the Russian Revolution, so it involved some historical characteristics that
characterize Russia as well as
and is characterizing Russia till this very moment. But what is important, there was this attempt, as the Russians said, about so-called Перековка души, so you can express this in English as soul reformatting. And this is this manifestation that we want to have a new man, a new human, which is good, which is acting in a completely different way. So this is this delusional concept that you can change human nature. And this is very dangerous.
This is Common Sense Generation. If you like this channel, please subscribe, share, and comment. Your voice really matters.
And you also want to destroy all the history, tradition, and the values which were before. They tried it in some period in France, not with such a huge success. The Bolsheviks were with much bigger success.
They were more effective, yes. Both of these types of revolution we can name socialist one. And socialism is based also on this assumption that you can change human nature and consequently change the society. You can change human relations.
Funny thing is that the
entire society.
The French intellectuals have this urge to believe in idealism in this form, and also to not to see the consequences and reality of such we see it in Sartre. Back again, he didn't learn anything on the experience of French Revolution, and moreover, he didn't judge what happened in Russia in a critical way.
This is very characteristic. There are some notes from Stanisław Lem who criticized Sartre very much, because when Sartre visited Soviet Union, he said no word about the concentration camps that he knew about. And Lem said it's absolutely unacceptable, but it was intentional. And this is this way of thinking. We have to say that this mass terror and type of the genocide, which is very characteristic for the socialism, had different goals in Russia than in Germany, for instance. So maybe it's worthwhile highlighting that in our history, I mean in the history of the West, it was only the socialism that ended up in genocide, so in the massive elimination of masses of people on, let's say, with the use of industrial methods, which is intentional. And as Leszek Kołakowski highlights in the comments to his main currents of Marxism, he highlights that socialism always ends up in a genocide. And if we look upon Russia and Germany, these are two types of socialism, national one and international one. So there are differences, but a lot of similarities. And one of the similarities is genocide. However, in Germany, this genocide with what intention to eliminate the enemy, while in Russia, the intention of the genocide was to reformat the society by giving them this terrifying example that if you don't reformat, you will end up in concentration in death camps. So it was more or less open, and it had educational goals.
More affected Russia.
But this is the way of exercising power in socialism. And socialism ends up in a genocide because it's the ultimate threshold in this driving to change the human nature, which is unchangeable. This is something that Christianity understands, but not only Christianity.
We are actually observing it right now as well, but very often people don't want to say about it, but we have concentration camps in China currently, in Xinjiang, and there, with Sir Geoffrey Nice, they decided, and it's already a genocide because of the forced
China is definitely a despotic state. China is a communist country in political terms, not economical. If you want to take up any political career in China, you have to be a communist and you have to follow this communist pattern. But what we are observing now in the West, we have to admit that this is a kind of socialism, but it's a kind of mixture of, in terms of characteristics, of German and Russian types of socialism, because if you can distinguish those two types of socialism also by observing what was the definition of the enemy. And this is very important, that in case of a socialist, you don't have adversaries. There's nobody that you want to discuss with. They are the enemies you want to eliminate or reformat.
So you want to, in Bolshevik ways, in the Russian way of revolution and socialism, you want to eliminate the aristocracy at the beginning.
Well, the enemy was defined in social terms. It was bourgeois, the people who had production means, while in Germany, the enemy was defined basing on
race,
genetic terms and race. So if we observe now these movements that emerge, first of all, in the United States, Black Lives Matter, wokeism, political correctness, it more resembles national socialism in terms of definition of the enemy, because it's obviously based on race, and this contradiction between us and them is based on race. And this is, of course, very dangerous, but it suggests that we don't want to discuss with those enemies, we want to eliminate them ultimately.
So all white male are going to be eliminated.
They are the enemies. And we can hear now in Poland also that white male Catholic is disastrous for the planet, for the environment, for the society.
In the US, it's still white male Protestant. So for all the American presidents
if we are talking about these forces that are operating in a society that we can observe, in a society that is organized in a democratic state, you can observe two pairs of forces, while normally people can name only the one. Because under normal conditions, there is some dynamic balance between the forces of freedom and the forces of order. So there is this pair of force, the force of freedom and the force of order, that is balancing like a pendulum between its maximum and minimum. Once we want to have more freedom, we are compromising safety. And on the other hand, when we want to provide more safety to the society, we have to compromise freedom. But this is all within certain thresholds and limits that are acceptable.
There's the other, very similar, but on the level of economics, either we want to nourish the most exceptional ones, or we want to feed the masses, the whole group. So this is also this choice and balance between.
But what is important that in a society, you cannot maximize those two values at the same time. So you cannot have maximum safety and maximum freedom.
Yes.
And freedom is essential because freedom is the basis for entrepreneurship, for invention, because freedom is connected with taking risk, and only by taking risk you can
produce something new. But on the other side, some basic safety is needed.
What we are observing now in Western societies is that these forces are operating far beyond its limits. And this suggests that there is a second pair of forces that is operating parallelly to the first one, but we can see this pair only when it transgresses the limits. And this is the force of anarchy versus the force of tyranny. And the nature of this force is that it has no limits. So it goes to anarchy and then goes back to tyranny. So we can say that we can observe that these new movements in the West, they are destroying traditional society, so they're producing anarchy in a society. And they are intentionally pushing over the limits to achieve the state where we can more easily accept the safety at the level of tyranny.
This is a difficult balance and check of powers. I do hope that...
this is difficult and delicate, and it requires common sense.
Common sense and a strong middle class, which always advocates for some moderate ways of going out of the problems. And of course, that's why we so much need the virtue of common sense. And that's why I thank you very much for being in our show, and to you, the viewers of Common Sense Generation. Thank you very much for watching this show. And I do hope you liked it. I do hope it's thought-provoking. And I also thank Polish National Foundation for cooperation. Thank you for being with us.
This is Common Sense Generation. Common Sense Generation.